The announcement crackled through Gate 27's speakers at Denver International Airport. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to begin boarding flight 1847 to Miami. We'll start with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance. I adjusted my laptop bag and checked my boarding pass one more time. Seat 12, EAA, window seat, I'd specifically requested for this red-eye flight. After 3 grueling days of client meetings in Colorado, I was exhausted and looking forward to collapsing into that seat for the 4-hour journey home. That's when I first noticed her. She stood near the gate podium like a sentinel, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the harsh fluorescent lights, designer handbag clutched in one hand, first-class boarding pass in the other. She radiated the kind of entitled energy that makes seasoned travelers instinctively keep their distance. Her voice carried across the waiting area as she spoke to someone on her phone. "No, Richard. I specifically told them I needed an aisle seat in the first row. The first row. Do you understand how much I paid for this ticket?" The gate agent, a young woman named Sarah, according to her name tag, was trying to maintain her professional smile while handling the usual pre-boarding chaos. Families were gathering their belongings. Business travelers were finishing last-minute calls, and the usual collection of tired passengers was forming a loose queue. But the woman with the blonde hair, let's call her Karen, because that's exactly what she turned out to be, wasn't interested in waiting like everyone else. She marched up to the podium, interrupting Sarah mid-announcement. "Excuse me, but there's been a mistake with my seating assignment." Sarah paused her boarding call and turned to Karen with practiced patience. "Of course, ma'am. Let me take a look at your boarding pass and see what I can do to help." "What you can do," Karen said, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby passengers, "is fix this immediately. I booked this flight 6 weeks ago, specifically requesting seat 1A instead. I've been assigned 1C. Do you have any idea how claustrophobic I am? I absolutely cannot sit in a middle seat." I watched this exchange while pretending to scroll through my phone, already sensing this wasn't going to end well. Sarah pulled up Karen's reservation on her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Ma'am, I see here that you're actually assigned to seat 1C, which is an aisle seat, not a middle seat. Seat 1A would be the window seat." Perhaps there was some confusion. Karen's face flushed red. "Don't tell me what seat I requested. I've been flying first class for 20 years, and I know the difference between an aisle and a window seat." The irony wasn't lost on anyone within earshot, including me. "Ma'am," Sarah continued, with admirable calm, "seat 1C is definitely an aisle seat. However, if you'd prefer the window seat in 1A, I can check if it's available." "Of course, it should be available," Karen snapped. "That's what I paid for." Sarah's fingers danced across her keyboard again. After a moment, she looked up with what I could tell was carefully controlled frustration. "I'm sorry, but seat 1A is occupied by another first-class passenger. However, I do have 1B available, which is the middle seat, or I can see if there are any other first-class options." "Absolutely not," Karen declared, loud enough that conversations around the gate area began to quiet. "I am not sitting in a middle seat, and I am not changing my seat assignment because of your airline's incompetence." By now, other passengers were openly staring. A businessman in an expensive suit shook his head and muttered something under his breath. A family with 2 young children had stopped their pre-flight preparations to watch the drama unfold. Sarah took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration. Let me call my supervisor to see what other options we might have." "Your supervisor?" Karen's voice pitched higher. "I don't want to talk to your supervisor. I want you to fix this right now. Move whoever is in 1A to another seat." "I'm afraid I can't do that without the other passengers' consent," Sarah explained. "But my supervisor might have additional options." Karen planted her hands on the counter and leaned forward. "Listen to me very carefully. I have a connecting flight in Miami that I absolutely cannot miss. I have a very important business meeting tomorrow morning, and if I'm delayed because of your airline's mistakes, there will be consequences." The threat hung in the air like storm clouds. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She picked up her phone and made a quick call. While waiting for the supervisor, Karen turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers. "Can you believe this? I pay thousands of dollars for first-class service, and they can't even get a simple seat assignment right." A few passengers exchanged glances, but most just wanted to board the plane and get on with their journey. The family with children had moved 2 seats farther from the gate, clearly trying to avoid the growing drama. That's when Karen made her first tactical error. Instead of waiting patiently for the supervisor, she decided to escalate further. "You know what? I'm not moving from this counter until this is resolved to my satisfaction. No one is boarding this plane until I get the seat I paid for." The supervisor arrived within minutes, seasoned woman in her 50s, named Patricia, according to her name tag. She had the bearing of someone who dealt with thousands of difficult passengers and wasn't easily rattled. "Good evening, ma'am. I understand there's been some confusion about your seat assignment. Let me see what we can do to resolve this quickly so we can get everyone boarded on time." Karen immediately launched into her complaint, her voice growing shriller with each word. "This is completely unacceptable. I specifically requested seat 1A, and your incompetent staff assigned me to the wrong seat. I demand that whoever is in my seat be moved immediately." Patricia pulled up the reservation system on Sarah's computer, studying the screen carefully. "Ma'am, I can see that when you booked this reservation, you selected seat 1C, which is an aisle seat in the first row. The system shows no record of a request for 1A. "That's impossible," Karen declared. "I know what I booked. I understand this is frustrating," Patricia said calmly. "What I can offer you is seat 2A, which is a window seat in the second row. Or I can put you on our standby list for any first-class upgrades on later flights tonight." Karen's face went from red to purple. "I am not sitting in the second row, and I am not taking a later flight. I want seat 1A, and I want it right now." "Ma'am, the passenger in 1A checked in online yesterday and has already boarded the aircraft. I cannot remove a passenger from their confirmed seat without cause." That's when Karen made the decision that would seal her fate. "Fine," she said, grabbing her carry-on bag. "If you won't fix this, I'll talk to the passenger myself." Before Patricia or Sarah could stop her, Karen marched toward the Jetbridge entrance. The gate agent scanning boarding passes tried to intercept her, but Karen pushed past. "Ma'am, you can't board without." "I have a first-class ticket," Karen shouted back, waving her boarding pass. I have every right to board this aircraft. Patricia immediately grabbed her radio. We have a situation at Gate 27. Passenger proceeding down Jetbridge without proper clearance. The remaining passengers in the gate area watched in stunned silence as Karen disappeared down the Jetbridge. Parents pulled their children closer. Business travelers checked their watches anxiously. The atmosphere had shifted from mild annoyance to genuine concern. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia announced over the gate's PA system. We're going to have a brief delay while we resolve a passenger issue. Please remain in the gate area. A collective groan rose from the waiting passengers, but everyone understood that something serious was happening. I decided to position myself closer to the Jetbridge entrance, partly out of curiosity and partly because I suspected this was about to become a much bigger situation. Other passengers had the same idea, and soon a small crowd had gathered near the gate podium through the Jetbridge windows. We could see Karen's blonde hair as she marched down the narrow corridor toward the aircraft. The gate agents were speaking rapidly into their radios, and Patricia was on her phone with what sounded like airport security. Ladies and gentlemen, came a new voice over the PA system, this one with the calm authority of a pilot. This is Captain Rodriguez. We're going to have a slight delay while we address a passenger situation. We appreciate your patience. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Passengers were getting restless, checking their phones and grumbling about missed connections. The family with young children had found seats near the window, the parents taking turns, entertaining their kids while keeping one eye on the unfolding drama. Then we heard Karen's voice, now audible through the Jetbridge, though we couldn't make out the words. It was clear she was in a heated argument with someone. Patricia's radio crackled. Gate 27, this is the flight deck. We need security assistance immediately. We have a passenger who's boarded the aircraft and is refusing to take her assigned seat or leave the plane. Within moments, 2 airport security officers appeared at the gate, their radios buzzing with chatter. Patricia briefed them quickly, and they headed down the Jetbridge with the determined stride of professionals who'd handled similar situations before. What do you think is happening? Asked an elderly gentleman standing next to me. Sounds like she went to confront whoever is in seat 1A, I replied. This is not going to end well for her. And I was right. Through the Jetbridge windows, we could now see the security officers' uniforms as they made their way toward the aircraft. The drama was about to reach its climax. More passengers had gathered around the gate area now, creating an impromptu audience for what was becoming the evening's main entertainment. People were pulling out phones, though whether to record the incident or just check social media while waiting, I couldn't tell. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew we were witnessing something that would either be resolved quickly or become a much bigger problem. Based on Karen's behavior so far, I was betting on the latter. 20-5 minutes had passed since Karen stormed down the Jetbridge. The gate area was buzzing with conversation as passengers shared their theories about what was happening. Some were getting genuinely frustrated about the delay, while others seemed to be enjoying the unexpected entertainment. That's when Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the PA system again, this time with an edge of steel beneath his professional calm. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a passenger who has boarded the aircraft and is currently blocking the Jetbridge while disputing her seat assignment. This passenger is preventing other passengers from boarding and is disrupting the safety and security of this flight. A hush fell over the gate area. This was clearly more serious than a simple seat dispute. I want to be completely transparent with all of you, the captain continued. Federal aviation regulations are very clear about disruptive passenger behavior. Any passenger who interferes with the duties of flight crew members or prevents the safe operation of an aircraft can be removed from the flight and may face federal charges. Through the Jetbridge windows, we could see more activity. It looked like additional personnel had arrived, possibly airline managers or even federal air marshals. The passenger in question has been given multiple opportunities to take her assigned seat or leave the aircraft voluntarily. She has refused both options and is currently preventing this flight from departing on schedule. Patricia appeared at the gate podium, looking grave. She whispered something to Sarah, who immediately began typing on her computer. Therefore, Captain Rodriguez announced, "I am making the decision to remove this passenger from the aircraft. Security personnel are currently escorting her off the plane. Once this situation is resolved, we will resume boarding immediately." A cheer actually went up from some of the waiting passengers. Others applauded. The businessman in the expensive suit called out, "About time." But the captain wasn't finished. "I want all passengers to understand something very important. When someone disrupts a flight, they don't just affect themselves, they affect every single person trying to get to their destination. The passenger being removed has caused a 30-minute delay that will impact connections, business meetings, and family reunions for 180 people." The gravity of his words settled over the gate area. This wasn't just about one entitled passenger anymore. It was about the ripple effect of selfish behavior. "We take these situations very seriously, and there will be consequences." The jet door opened, and Karen emerged, flanked by 2 security officers. Her perfectly styled hair was now disheveled, her designer outfit wrinkled, and her face was a mask of rage and humiliation. But what happened next was something I'll never forget. Instead of quickly escorting her away from the gate, one of the security officers stopped and spoke to Patricia. After a brief conversation, Patricia picked up the gate microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the passenger who disrupted boarding has been removed from the aircraft and will not be traveling on this flight. However, per airline policy and federal regulations, her luggage must also be removed from the cargo hold before we can depart." Karen's face went white. "You can't do this to me," she shouted, her voice carrying across the entire gate area. "I have a very important meeting tomorrow. I'll sue this airline into bankruptcy." The security officers tried to guide her away, but Karen planted her feet and continued her tirade. "Do you people have any idea who I am? I fly first class on this airline every month. I'll have all of your jobs." Every passenger in the gate area was watching now. Some were openly recording with their phones. The family with children had moved their kids behind them, shielding them from the spectacle. "Ma'am," one of the security officers said firmly, "you need to come with us now, or you'll be facing additional charges." Charges? Karen laughed bitterly. "For what? Wanting the seat I paid for." That's when Patricia stepped in with a clipboard full of paperwork. "Ma'am, you're being cited for interfering with flight crew duties, disrupting aircraft operations, and trespassing. You'll need to speak with a federal air marshal about the potential criminal charges. The color drained from Karen's face completely. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice had lost much of its earlier venom. "I just wanted my correct seat." One of the gate agents, not Sarah, but another employee who'd arrived during the chaos, looked up from his computer. "Ma'am, I'm also required to inform you that you've been placed on our airline's no-fly list pending investigation of this incident." Karen staggered as if she'd been physically struck. "No-fly list? You can't do that." "Actually, we can, and we have," Patricia said calmly. "Disrupting flight operations is grounds for immediate placement on the restricted passenger list." As Karen was finally escorted away by security, still protesting and making threats about lawsuits, Captain Rodriguez's voice returned to the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment to address what just happened here, because I think there's an important lesson for all of us." The gate area, which had been buzzing with conversation, fell quiet again. In 23 years of flying commercial aircraft, I've seen this scenario play out dozens of times. A passenger creates a problem that doesn't actually exist, escalates it beyond all reason, and then faces consequences they never imagined. His voice carried the weight of experience and genuine concern. The passenger who was just removed had the seat she requested. She had changed her own reservation to get exactly what she wanted. But instead of double-checking her records or simply asking politely for clarification, she chose to create a federal incident that has now impacted every person at this gate. Through the Jetbridge windows, we could see ground crew members working around the aircraft, presumably removing Karen's luggage from the cargo hold. "I want everyone to understand something important about aviation security," the captain continued. "We don't remove passengers from flights lightly. Every single person who works for an airline, from gate agents to flight attendants to pilots, wants to get you to your destination safely and on time. But when someone threatens the safety and security of a flight, when they disrupt operations and endanger other passengers, we have no choice but to act." The passenger who was removed tonight didn't just inconvenience herself, she potentially put 180 other people at risk by blocking emergency exits and creating a chaotic situation aboard the aircraft. A few passengers nodded in agreement. The family with children was listening intently, and I realized the parents were probably using this as a teaching moment for their kids. The consequences she's facing now: removal from the flight, placement on the no-fly list, potential federal charges. These aren't punishments we impose out of spite. They're protective measures designed to ensure the safety of every passenger who flies. The captain paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was warmer but still serious. "I also want to commend our gate agents, Sarah and Patricia, who handled this situation with extraordinary professionalism under very difficult circumstances. They followed protocol, remained calm under pressure, and prioritized passenger safety above all else." Spontaneous applause broke out across the gate area. Sarah, who had been standing quietly behind the counter throughout the ordeal, actually blushed. "Now," Captain Rodriguez announced, "I know many of you have connecting flights and important appointments waiting for you. Our ground crew is working as quickly as possible to remove the disrupting passengers' luggage so we can get you all on your way." Patricia stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to resume boarding in just a few minutes. Due to this delay, our crew will be working with air traffic control to make up as much time as possible during flight. We also have customer service representatives standing by to help anyone who might miss connections because of this incident. The mood in the gate area had shifted dramatically. What had started as frustration over a delay had turned into something resembling solidarity. Passengers were talking to each other, sharing stories about their own difficult travel experiences and expressing sympathy for the gate agents who had to deal with situations like this. The elderly gentleman I'd spoken with earlier shook his head. In all my years of flying, I've never seen anything quite like that. To think she caused all this trouble over a seat she had actually requested herself. The worst part, added a woman who'd been sitting nearby, is that she probably would have been perfectly comfortable in 1C. First-class aisle seats are fantastic. A businessman who'd been on his laptop throughout most of the drama looked up. I fly every week for work. Trust me. Airline employees deal with this kind of thing more often than you'd think. Most of the time it doesn't escalate to this level, but entitled passengers are becoming more and more common. What I don't understand, said another passenger, is why she didn't just check her email confirmations before coming to the airport. I always print out my boarding passes and double-check my seat assignments. The family with children had moved closer to the gate counter, and I overheard the father explaining to his young son, "This is why we always use our polite words when we travel, buddy. Even when things don't go the way we planned." 20 minutes after Karen had been escorted away, a ground crew member appeared at the Jetbridge entrance and gave Patricia a thumbs up. Her luggage had been successfully removed from the cargo hold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced, "we're now ready to resume boarding. We'll start with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance." As we finally began boarding the aircraft, I couldn't help but notice the atmosphere among the passengers. Instead of the usual tired, hurried energy of a red-eye flight, there was an almost festive mood. People were chatting with strangers, flight attendants were smiling more than usual, and there was a shared sense of having witnessed something extraordinary. When I reached my seat to a window seat I'd been looking forward to, I discovered I had a perfect view of the gate area through the aircraft's window, and that's when I saw her. Karen was still there. She was sitting in one of the gate area chairs, surrounded by her luggage, speaking animatedly on her phone. From her gestures and facial expressions, it was clear she was not having a pleasant conversation, probably trying to book another flight, or calling a lawyer, or both. The passenger in the seat next to me, a woman about my age, traveling for business, noticed me watching. "Is that her?" she asked. "That's her," I confirmed. "Wow. She really is going to have to watch us leave without her." And that's exactly what happened. As our aircraft pushed back from the gate, I watched Karen through the window. She was still on her phone, pacing back and forth in front of the gate counter. At some point, she must have realized our plane was moving, because she stopped mid-conversation and stared directly at our aircraft. I could see her face clearly through the window, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and what might have been the first hint of genuine regret. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're number 3 for takeoff, and we should be airborne in just a few minutes. Our flight time to Miami will be approximately 3 hours and 50 minutes. As we taxied toward the runway, I kept Karen in sight as long as possible. She had moved to the gate window and was watching our plane with what appeared to be growing realization of what her behavior had cost her. The woman next to me had pulled out her tablet and was showing me something on the screen. I looked up. "The airline's no-fly list policy," she said. "For incidents involving disruption of flight operations, the minimum ban is 1 year. If federal charges are filed, it could be permanent." "Seriously?" I asked. "Seriously. And that's just for this airline. Other carriers often share information about disruptive passengers, so she might find herself banned from multiple airlines." As our plane climbed into the night sky above Denver, I found myself thinking about the broader implications of what we'd all witnessed. Considered, the gate agents had to deal with an abusive passenger, potentially putting their own safety at risk. The flight crew had to delay departure and work with security personnel instead of focusing on passenger safety. The ground crew had to remove luggage from a fully loaded cargo hold, delaying their work on other flights. And then there were the passengers. 180 people had their travel plans disrupted because one person couldn't accept that she had made a mistake. The flight attendant came by for drink service, and I struck up a conversation with her about the incident. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing more often than we'd like," she told me quietly. "When someone is being disruptive on the ground, we have no way of knowing how they'll behave once we're in the air. 30,000 feet is not the place to deal with an uncontrolled passenger." She paused to serve drinks to other passengers, then continued our conversation. "What makes it worse is that most of these situations are completely preventable. If that passenger had simply double-checked her reservation, instead, she created a federal incident," I said. "Exactly. And now she's facing consequences that will affect her for years. All because she couldn't admit she might have made a mistake." The businessman across the aisle overheard our conversation and leaned over. "I travel constantly for work," he said. "Passengers do. Being rude or demanding doesn't get you better service, it gets you flagged as a problem passenger." The flight attendant nodded. "We remember passengers who are kind and polite, just like we remember passengers who are difficult. Guess which ones get better service?" 3 hours into our flight, as we began our descent into Miami, I reflected on the evening's events. What had started as a simple seat assignment dispute had escalated into a perfect, but more importantly, everyone who witnessed her behavior had learned something valuable about travel. Time, ladies and gentlemen. We're beginning our final descent into Miami International Airport. Your understanding and cooperation made it possible for us to resolve a difficult situation safely and professionally. I also want to remind everyone that commercial aviation is a team effort, from the gate agents who check you in to the ground crew who load your bags to the flight attendants who ensure your safety. It affects everyone. But when passengers like yourselves show patience, understanding, and basic courtesy, it makes our job not just easier, but genuinely rewarding. As we touched down in Miami, I caught a glimpse of the sunrise breaking over the horizon. It had been a long night, but somehow I felt more optimistic about air travel than I had in years. The passenger next to me was packing up her tablet. "I keep thinking about that woman," she said. "Do you think she learned anything from this?" "I hope so," I replied. "But honestly, people who behave that way usually find a way to blame everyone else for their problems." "Still," she said, "at least everyone else at that gate learned something." "I know I did." "What's that?" 6 months later, I was telling this story to a friend over coffee. What happened that night in Denver? Karen didn't physically harm anyone. She blocked emergency exits, prevented other passengers from boarding, and created chaos in what's supposed to be a highly controlled environment. More importantly, she demonstrated a level of entitlement and disregard for others that, if left unchecked, could have led to even more serious incidents. The consequences: she faced removal from the flight, placement on the no-fly list, and potential federal charges. Weren't punishments designed to be cruel. They were protective measures designed to ensure the safety of future passengers and the people who work in aviation. But there's a simpler lesson in this story: to treat people with kindness and respect, especially when they're trying to help. You double-check your own information before blaming others for mistakes. And remember that your actions don't just affect you, they affect everyone around you in the end. Karen got exactly what she deserved. She blocked the Jetbridge to complain about a problem that didn't exist. You don't understand. I never requested seat 1C. Patricia exchanged glances with Sarah, then pulled up something on the computer. When you initially made this reservation 6 weeks ago, you did select seat 1A. A murmur went through the crowd. Was Karen actually right? However, Patricia continued, the record also shows that you called our customer service line 3 weeks ago and specifically requested to change your seat to 1C because you wanted an aisle seat instead of a window seat. The gate area fell silent. Karen's mouth opened and closed without sound. Please move me to an aisle seat in the first row. Karen's face cycled through several emotions: confusion, realization, and then desperate denial. That's not, I would never, ... Patricia wasn't finished. The call was recorded, as all customer service calls are. The representative also sent you a confirmation email showing your new seat assignment, which you acknowledged by replying thank you. One of the watching passengers actually gasped. The businessman who'd been complaining earlier started laughing. She forgot she changed her own seat as 1C, and you completed the check-in process without changing it. Karen stood there, frozen, as the full scope of her mistake became clear, not just to her, but to everyone watching. She had caused a federal incident, been removed from a flight, placed on a no-fly list, and potentially faced criminal charges, all because she had forgotten that she had personally requested the seat change. The security officers, who had been waiting patiently during this revelation, now stepped forward. But Karen had one more surprise for everyone. I want to speak to the passenger in 1A, she said desperately. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe they'll switch with me. Patricia looked at her with something approaching pity. Ma'am, you can't reboard the aircraft. You've been removed for disruptive behavior and placed on the no-fly list. Even if every passenger on that plane wanted to give you their seat, federal regulations prohibit you from flying tonight.